Welcome to a peer review episode of the RXP podcast. I'll be your host today, Alex, and for today's peer review, we'll be discussing Riot Games and Fortitia's production of the Netflix show Arcane. And joining me to do so is my co-host and loving sister, Tiffany.
I'm so excited to deep dive this show with you. I've been holding back. We've been talking a little bit back and forth. I finished the show ahead of you, and it really, really pained me that I couldn't just be like, yo, let's talk about it immediately after I watched it.
Well, now here we are. Now's the time. So, for listeners out there, this is the peer review of Arcane Season 1, and it will be spoiler-filled. So, this is your warning now. If you haven't seen the first season of Arcane, go watch it. It's on Netflix. All 9 episodes are out as of this recording. And come back afterwards and then give it a listen. You know, there'll be timestamps. Like I said, this is your warning. After the words, potentially any spoilers that come out, you've been warned. So with that, we're now transitioning into our thoughts on the show. And so for this episode of peer review, I want to keep it a little bit broad, you know, less structured. It's just going to be our thoughts, what we liked, what we didn't like, and then maybe what we would like to see for the future. But so for the first phase, what we like and didn't like, I want to start off. So how I watched this, I watched the first episode when it premiered, and I then waited for the remainder of the episodes, because what was interesting about this release on Netflix was they didn't release all the episodes at once for the season, but they did 3 sets of 3. So they basically did an Act 1 of episodes 1 through 3, Act 2 of episodes 4 through 6, and then Act 3 of episodes 7 through 9. And I waited till all the remainder 9 episodes were out, and then I actually watched episodes 2 through 9 in 2 days. So it took me 2 days to get through all of it. I really enjoyed it. I thought watching it in this way was actually more beneficial to me because I was so intrigued by the story and where things were going, that if I had to wait, you know, at the end of episode 3, if I had to wait for episodes 4 through 6, that would have been torture. And then if I had to wait at the end of episode 6 to watch 7 through 9, that would have been torture. So for me, I had a great time. And overall, I really enjoyed the show. I think, you know, despite this being based on League of Legends, and more specifically the world of League of Legends, so what they call Runeterra, I think they did a very good job in making this accessible to people that have no connections to the show. I think, you know, from the get-go, I recommend this is a watchable show regardless of whether or not you know League of Legends. And I guess to also preface this for you listeners out there, Tiffany and I have both played League of Legends for over 10 years now. We both started back in season 1, so we've been playing this game for over a decade. We have a lot of experience with the champions that have appeared in the show, with the world of Runeterra itself, and so this is kind of us coming at it with this knowledge. You know, we're not just some new people just saying, oh yeah, Arcane was a great looking show. I think it did a lot of good things that it referenced from the games, and also I felt like there are some things they could improve on, but you know, maybe that's what future seasons of the show could look like. So, you know, I want to hand off, Tiffany, what did you like? Was there anything that stands out, or maybe what you didn't like? You know, what is the most urgent feeling you have about Arcane?
So when you said that you watched this show, like almost essentially binged it on your own time, I watched this show every freaking Saturday for 3 weeks, essentially. Like, I basically watched it the weekends they came out. And I was so, like, excited for when the weekend came that I could watch more. What's also kind of weird is that Netflix usually releases shows on Fridays. So the fact that this was on Saturday kind of threw me for a loop. Because, like, for me, I'm like, oh, it's Friday. I can go, you know, after work, I can watch my show. Or before work, I can watch it. And I had to wait. So that was kind of hard for me. I loved this show. Absolutely adored it. You know, in the last, you know, Alex mentioned I've been playing this game for a long time. Honestly, in the last 5 or 6 years, I kind of really geared towards more of the all random, all mid mode. So when I play League of Legends now, I don't really play 5s. mainly because there was a lot of things, a lot of updates that happened and blah blah blah. But I love a lot of these champions, and I like the world of Runeterra. Never really got much into the lore, so seeing it played out on screen was beautiful. And so I am quite familiar with these champions in the show. However, to me, their backstory was really an open slate. You know what I mean? Like brand new things for me. I knew Jinx and Vi were sisters, but like even then, that was kind of a barely what I knew. When I play the game, I play for the moves and the combat of trying to destroy the towers. Anyway, so my favorite thing about this show was the mixture of champions that we know and new characters. I thought it really hit a sweet spot. Were there characters I was hoping to see? Yes. Did we see them? No. But that's something I can talk about more later. But I thought that even the foreshadowing was really great because I didn't know the backstory of a character named Warwick. I didn't realize that he may have been human, and there are rumors going around that actually Vander turned into Warwick through the Shimmer. And so I was like, ooh, that's intriguing. And then also, Alex, I need to ask you this question. So I ended up actually watching the first episode twice because I had another friend that was intrigued by the Arcane. And so I watched the first episode with them. Did you anticipate Echo being the hoverboard leader?
Oh, yes. The moment we saw him and the moment he said something, I knew that was Echo from the get-go.
Wait, did you recognize his voice, or was it his tech that made you realize that it was Echo?
Well, so I know they were using the hoverboards, and that's not something that Echo uses in League of Legends, so that's completely separate to the the show. Yeah. But for me, it was the attitude and the voice that brought it away. Also, the fact that he appeared as a child, I think that was kind of the major transition that a lot of the characters that appeared early on the show continue to appear. So I also didn't think it would make sense for them to have Echo in the first 3 episodes as a kid and for him to never appear again for the rest of the show. So it was just a very obvious thing. Also, the color scheme is very Echo. Like that green is something that is also associated with Echo's design. Right. So that was also another thing that kind of clued me in.
Okay, because like when I watch episodes 4 through 6, I was like, where's Echo? Like I was like, where's my cute little baby boy Echo? Which honestly, listeners, I don't play Echo in League because I think he's complicated and I just don't want to wrap my head around his gameplay style. But and I never really cared about Echo. That's another thing. This show made me care about champions that I never really cared about before. So anyway, Alex, 4 through 6, I was like, where's Echo at? And it wasn't until that I read some like blog post somewhere that's like, people are asking where Echo is. He may have been here all along. And like they're, speculating that the hoverboard leader was Echo or the firelight leader was Echo. Alex, in the first episode, when Echo is listening to the enforcer leader and Vander talk at the shop that Echo works at, you know what I'm talking about? That shop. And he was like listening to them and looking like through this contraption, like binocular periscope thing. Alex, the eye of the periscope was coming out of the mask that Echo was wearing as an adult. Wait, did you know that? Or
so,
are you just like,
now that you say that, I remember it, but also I just thought it was Echo because it just made sense like story wise and also like, from things of the game where I'm like the voice fits, the colors fit, and also it just didn't make sense that he wouldn't come back in some fashion.
Okay, so but what I'm saying is that the foreshadowing was there in freaking episode 1, but I only noticed it after I was rewatching that first episode, and also I'd seen episodes 4 through 6 before I saw episode 1 again. But stuff like that. And then when you pointed out to me that Clagger, one of the friends in the beginning, had Vi's goggles, like, come on. That's great
Right. So
storytelling.
for listeners out there, in the game, when Vi was originally released, she wears a pair of goggles that we then see in the show that we then find out were originally her friend's goggles, who unfortunately perishes in episode 3. So there was already kind of foreshadowing there, where if you notice that and you remember from her in-game art, that you could tell the fate of that character, and by happenstance probably the fate of the other character, Milo, that they would both not be surviving for long. So that was kind of also nice to see. And I think this just goes to show that there are little things like, us having played the game that we can clue in on. So things like Echo, probably the Firelight leader being him, and the fact that, Clygor's demise being eventual, that we knew. But also, it was also a very nice surprise for you that don't know anything about Lee. And so obviously they do a pretty good job of like keeping those strands moving forward throughout the story.
Yeah, and then another like thing that I really liked as a nod to the game was when Vi interacts with Caitlyn and she calls Caitlyn Cupcake, like thanks Cupcake or whatever. And Caitlyn, one of Caitlyn's moves is a trap, almost like a bear trap that has a cupcake in it. And like I really like that. Like because I got really excited when I heard that line. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, that's a nod to the game. And then, yeah.
Other nods to the game, too, were the sound effects, right? Like, I think it's in episode 8, or I guess it might be episode 9, when Vi and Jace are fighting in the Shimmer Factory. Those guardians that guard the factory is the item Turbo Chem Tank in the game. So that visual is already present from having played the game to say, oh, I recognize that. And now that contextualizes that item itself in that world. And then also when they're fighting, when Vi's gauntlets charge up, and then when Jace is wielding the Mercury Hammer, they use sound effects from the game. So the actual like charging noise of her fists like amping up, and then Jace, using Shock Blast, right, which is that orb, like the energy blast he's shooting. And then when he changes into hammer form and does even like the static shield to like defend himself. So there's a lot of cool references even to the game. And the very last scene, which I'll just reference now, right? Obviously, spoilers, I've already been warned, with Jinx firing the super mega death rocket at the counselor's room at the top of the tower. Like, that was just a fun image of, seeing the smile plastered on the rocket's face, and then the glass shattering and seeing like the smile kind of in all these just scattered pieces. That was such a great moment to say, hey, a lot of these things are from the game. They take a lot of inspiration. It all visually looks great. And so I'm definitely happy how much integration there is. And, as I said before, you don't need to know it. This is just an extra plus for all the people that have played the game, but it's equally enjoyable, even if you haven't. So I want to ask, though, we talked about a lot of things. And you specifically mentioned the great mix of both champions from the game that appeared and also non-champion characters that have appeared. So I want to ask, what's your favorite non-champion character and your favorite champion character that appeared in the show?
Man, that's so hard because Caitlyn is literally one of my favorite champs in League of Legends. I love her aesthetic and I love playing her in the game. But I also love Heimerdinger. I loved Heimerdinger in this game. Mainly because I think I loved seeing a Yordle. Like in this, like basically.
Which, by the way, did they? I don't think they ever acknowledged he was specifically a Yordle, right?
They did not.
They never said the term Yordle.
No. Which, by the way, was that weird? Like Light District lady, was she a Yordle?
I think she's a Yordle because from what they generally followed in the past with the game, the female Yordles aren't hairy, but then the male Yordles are. So I would assume that whoever that red district or red light district short Yordle is a Yordle.
Yeah, so I really think my favorite character, like favorite league character was Heimerdinger, because I really like Yordles and I personally love Heimerdinger, and I also love him as a mentor character. And to be completely honest, I didn't realize his relationships with some, I mean, granted, obviously may have been for the story, right? But like in lore, I didn't realize that potentially Heimerdinger was related to Jace. Because I'm gonna be real with you, I did not care about Jace in the game at all. Like in League of Legends, I don't play Jace, and I was like, whatever, he's some dude with a hammer. This show made me a little bit more intrigued with him, interested in his backstory and everything. But my true love was Heimerdinger and Caitlyn. And non-League of Legends character.
Non-champion character.
Oh, so right. Oh, well, yes, because they're all League of Legends characters. But I think, man, okay, so if my answer is kind of hard. If Vander is not Warwick, if Vander is only himself, Vander's my favorite character. How strongly do you think he's actually Warwick?
So, I mean, visually, there were leaks. So, in League, there's a skin for Warwick that's called Project Warwick, and he has an animation in the game that shows his human face. Obviously, what that model shows and what Vander looks like in the show probably is not at all related, but if they are, they're, I guess, kind of similar because they're both light-skinned male faces. So if that's like the only, well, and I think that they also have facial hair. So if that's like the only connecting factor, it could be that Vander ends up, his body ends up becoming the basis for what Warwick is. But if not, I would say I would keep them separate because I think at the point Warwick he's no longer who the human he once was. I think there probably is a distinction to be made that there is Vander's life, and even if Vander's body is the basis of what Warwick is, that's not Vander anymore. So I would count Vander as a non-league champion.
Okay, then I choose Vander as my favorite character just because of his like honor and, fatherly trope in the show. I really cared about him. And like briefly going back to Heimerdinger, I'm a sucker for like, the wizened old like mage dude who, I mean, Heimer's not a mage, he's a scientist, but like I really like, I'm pretty like I have a good affinity for those types of characters. So, Gandalf, Dumbledore, love them.
Yeah. I think for me, I really liked Savarka. I think she's not a champion. She's not in the game. You can't play as her. She's got a badass, Chemtech arm, like gauntlet, substitute surrogate. And the fact that she survives, I'm very happy. At the end of episode 9, there's specifically a scene where after she's fought Vi, she's like struggling in the last drop to like light a cigar and to like take a smoke. But I'm very happy that she's not dead because I think she's a character that really can keep going. Not to say as an antagonist, but definitely to continue to be this kind of source of, you're not, Vi, you're not the only like tough girl down here, like in the Undercity. Like, I'm here too. Like, don't, like, watch out. You might have beaten me this time, but that's only because you had those gauntlets. So I really enjoyed her. I thought, even the moment when she's with Silco and Finn comes in with, I think, the other Chem Baron, who I forget that woman's name is, but it made it seem like that Finn had convinced Savarka to turn on Silco, but Silco gives a speech to Finn saying, I appreciate those with loyalty. And then bam, Savarka goes, whips out the sword from her arm and just cuts Finn's throat, like proving that she's loyal to Silco, and like that's an unwavering loyalty in spite of what Finn was trying to convince her to do. I really like that character about her. I think as a character, she's so well done just by like, not to say she's one note, but everything she does makes sense, right? Like she's fighting to survive. She fights for who's strongest, like fights for what she believes will get her ahead in life. And that's what the Undercity is about, right? Like the Undercity, as bad as it is, it's all about how do I live to wake up the next day. And so I really liked her design. And for champions, I think it's a very tough choice for me because there are a lot of champions that are obviously appearing in the show prior to them being how they appear in the game, which I think is one of the aspects I liked about the show. That, this isn't full-fledged the Sheriff of Piltover Caitlyn. This isn't the man of progress, Jace. This isn't the Piltover Enforcer Vi. These are basically their origin stories leading up to who they are. Like, this isn't Jinx, the loose cannon that she is in the game, right? Like, this is her route to becoming the loose cannon, right? A la shooting the super mega death rocket at the very end of the show, at least season 1. And so, to that effect, and even though I might not agree with the character's development through the show, I think I really like Jinx the most.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's that weird, not to say perverted nature of how she acts, but like, she's obviously a person that has gone through a lot, and even though she's, maybe succumbing to her like inner demons and obviously all of the like voices she hears in her head, right, and maybe the partial regret, right, like she makes the dummies of Milo and Clagor, obviously probably there being some sort of regret they're having inadvertently caused their deaths at the end of episode 3. I just like how she wants to believe, but she's still struggling, and it comes to that point where at the end, by her own hand, she determines who she wants to be. And even though it is Jinx and not Powder that who she decides to be, at least she's able to reach that conclusion for herself. And I think this is a very clear descent to madness for her. And I'm happy that she's able to make that choice. And it makes sense to me. I'm not like, Vi, her sister that has been chasing her this whole time, that inadvertently abandoned her, but that wanted her to come back to being Powder. She obviously also wanted to be with her, but it just makes sense why she chose to be Jinx. Like, despite everything, obviously the mistaken relationship between Vi and Caitlyn, right? All of those scenes that she sees them and she's like, why are you with her? Like, what does this topsider mean to you? Like, I'm your sister. Why aren't you with me trying to help me out? And so, despite Jinx just seemingly so over the edge, I think it's still within the bounds of like who she actually is, and I think a lot of it's justified. So
wow, her insecurities was really off-putting to me. Like I mentioned on a previous podcast episode where I was uncomfortable watching the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix, and so honestly, Jinx, her descent into madness really kind of reminded me of that, and it just made me sad for her. And also it made me angry when I'm just like, just communicate. Like, don't make assumptions, communicate, and maybe you'll figure out what you're feeling, your insecurities you're feeling about her potentially leaving you and not caring about you to be false. Now, I have a question for you, Alex. Was her eyes pink before her accident? Or
I don't know, they aren't, because I think if you look at her images, especially when she's younger, they're a different color, and so it is after she's been like juiced up with whatever Singe gives her. When her eyes change color. So
that's what I was curious about, because I honestly just couldn't remember what her eyes looked like throughout the show, but they made it a point when she in the last scene for her eyes to be like glowing pink. You know what I mean? And in the game, are her eyes? Do you recall if her eyes are pink in the game?
I don't know. I think in the splash art they are pink. So I think I would assume, in the in-game model they're pink. So I guess this is that to explain why they're pink. But as far as I know, they're, at least in game, there's no connection to Shimmer or whatever Singe gave her. Right. So I don't know why. I guess this is just a reason to make her eyes pink, but she doesn't have like that superhuman strength or whatever that the Shimmer the other gave to other people. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's really interesting that you really like Jinx. So I have a question for you. Were there any champions that you kind of turned around on, or like you were more like you wanted to know more about them from the show?
Yeah, and I guess part of this leans into what I didn't like about some aspects of the show, which I guess this is a free flowing episode, so like we're just gonna intermingle thoughts here. With how much they showed of Singed, they showed some and a whole lot of nothing, and I think it's interesting because as much as we play League, a lot of the story of these characters isn't conveyed in the game, right? The game is a MOBA.
Right.
It's just a PvP 5v5 game. And so you're not necessarily getting hard-hitting lore facts about why Singed carries a bottle of juice on his back. You know, we don't know why.
Right.
And so with this, they showed a lot of Singed, right? And obviously Singed is tied to kind of Victor's development, especially as a child. And I guess Victor's also aspirations to be the scientist that he is. But with how much they showed of him, I feel like, and maybe this is just a lead up to a future season, which I hope it is, but they kind of make him seem more important, right? Because he's obviously Silco's like main scientist, so he's the one like experimenting with Shimmer, like basically creating the concoction that allows Shimmer to be used to, you know, amp up humans and like turn them into these like aggravated like beasts. But besides that, they really don't talk about him. And I feel like Singed does have an interesting story beyond, you know, being like, oh, the mutation must continue. Like, he's not just, well, I guess his title in the game is the Mad Chemist. So yes, he is a mad chemist. But he's not just that. And I think there's more to him that I would like to know, but they just didn't show it. And I thought that was kind of a failing because they did a decent job in making me interested. They just didn't follow up on it.
I thought it was actually interesting that he literally is singed. Like,
oh, that his name is Singed. Like,
yes, no. So,
that also, yeah.
His face. I was because okay when I saw Act 1, I only knew he was Singed because I watch streaming shows with subtitles on, and straight up they were like Singed, like because
Singed colon.
Yeah, like said his dialogue, because if a character's off screen, they'll like identify which character that is. So I was like, oh, that's Singed. And then later in Act 2 and 3, we see that from the accident that Powder did, he burned half his face. And I was like, wow, I don't even think I realized in the game that
his mouth is wrapped up. Yeah.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Okay, that's why I didn't realize that he had a, you know, burns on his face because he wore a bandana or a face mask or whatever. So you say that you were disappointed in the lack of development of Singed in the show. I, on the other hand, became a huge sympathizer of Victor. Now, in the League of Legends, I don't care about Victor. I've played him like 2 times in my life, and it didn't jive with me. However, I'm not gonna lie, this show made me not want, like, so next time I play all ARAM and I get randomly assigned Victor, I'm not swapping out of him. I'm gonna play him. It's gonna be a bad situation, but I'm gonna test him out. His story was so compelling, so intrigued. He was Heimerdinger's assistant, then partnered with Jace, then tried to, you know, found out he was dying and wanted magic to save his life. Like
he wanted Hex Tech.
He wanted Hex Tech to save his life. And then Alex, did you expect Sky to die?
I don't. So that's an interesting thing. So in that moment,
so shocked
when the orb is turning into this weird, like, mutated form.
Yeah,
I actually thought that was related to the Void, because like the way it was like oozy and like kind of like a black glue. I'm like, is this like Hex Tech gone wrong and it's like gonna create a portal to the Void or something? But yeah, I didn't expect Sky to die, because also. I guess this is another thing I didn't like. They really leave Victor's story on that cliffhanger.
Yes.
With that happening and him being partly infused, like, with the Hex Tech, right? Because his body's like turning colors. And in the game, I know he's very obsessed with the glorious evolution. So like part of his story has always been improving life through like machinery / magic, right? Hex Tech.
Yeah.
And so that made sense to me, and I knew this would be the path he progresses down. But because I never read any of the color stories or the background stories that they publish related to the characters outside of the game, I didn't know about his like trials and tribulations. So it seems compelling that Sky, who's someone I guess he at least respected, right? Because Sky was his assistant. having passed away in this incident and that being his fault, I guess maybe that could be a further motivator to make him, more wanting to achieve his goal, right? So that Sky's inadvertent death isn't for naught. So I hope that maybe that plays into it. Otherwise, it seems just kind of a random moment of her passing away.
Yeah, that was traumatizing. I mean, I was half terrified that like somehow she'd get absorbed. Like somehow he'd mutate with her or something.
Like that,
I don't know.
Like whatever's going on with the hex core, like that is a very unknown thing that they just don't explain. And we're like, I guess season 2, maybe.
Yeah. I have to tell you though, I'm real glad I found out that season 2 was confirmed before I finished Act 3, and I'm so glad that I knew that, because honestly, if I hadn't known that and I finished Act 3, I think I would have been pretty mad, because it was a clear cliffhanger, and I was like, tell me more story, like don't just leave me hanging. I'm invested in these characters, Alex. Like, I need to know. And, like, I'm also invested in their relationships.
So, you talk about relationships. You talk about investment. One relationship that I don't think they invested a lot of time into is Silco and Powder.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
This is something they really ramp up to be like, oh, Silco and Powder, or I guess later when they're actually together, it's Silco and Jinx. They try to make a very heavy emphasis to be like they care for each other, but it's never obvious why that comes to be, because at the end of episode 3, when Silco finds Powder, and obviously he's kind of manipulating her to be like, your sister's gone, and then Silco lost his brother in quote unquote brother in Vander, so his brother's gone, so this is kind of like two misfits coming together and joining up. That I understand that dynamic in the relationship, to be like lost souls find one another and like forge a bond between each other, but it never was obvious to me why he over time thinks of her as a daughter. I guess maybe it's just like an adoptive daughter, obviously, but I feel like they did a very poor job, because I thought like individually Jinx and Silco are very interesting characters. Like I like them both. But I just didn't like how they tried to explain their relationship, because it just, they didn't show enough to make me believe it.
I completely agree with you. Like, literally all their development was off screen, and I did not appreciate that for this storytelling. Part of me wonders if, like, in Act 3, if we saw Silco have some compassion for, like, a little girl or something. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like a scene, like 2 scenes. Because honestly, in Act 1, he's a freaking monster. That little turd bucket that interrupted Vi's crew from getting all their goods from Piltover. Like Silco, is like, you gotta,
you're the test subject for the shimmer injection.
Yeah, and then he's like, do my dirty work, go kill people. You know what I mean? So honestly, seeing the end of Act 1 and you see Powder lunge into Silco's arms, and then slowly Silco what's that word?
Comforts?
Accepts. Yeah, comforts and accepts the embrace, and even contributes and like puts his arm. I literally was like,
reciprocates.
Reciprocate. That's the word I needed, Alex. That's the word. Reciprocates. Reciprocating that hug literally to me came out of nowhere. Like, for all I know, he hates children. Like up until that moment, he hates incompetent people. And clearly she was incompetent. Like, that really threw me for a loop. So I really agree with you there. Like, I was not sold. And honestly, though, in Act 2, I was like, guess they love each other or something. You know what I mean? Like, I just accepted it. I'm actually really excited to see Heimerdinger and Echo, like, evolve, to be completely honest with you. Like, Heimer has lost some students to other things, and then he finds another disciple. Like, I'm very intrigued by that.
All right.
And then
I think this is a good turning point then. So,
okay.
Kind of the second point for this episode And I guess the second point being in two subpoints, but leading off of Tiffany's comment right here, what do you want to see for the future? And I guess whether it's in season 2 in particular, based on the teaser that we got, there was obviously the Arcane A exploding in the purple gas, so that might mean something as to what's happening. But not just with the season 2, but for the future of Arcane, like what do you particularly want to see happen?
I'm not gonna lie, I need to know if Mel and Jace are actually real as a couple. I'm very...
you want closure there.
I need closure. Does Medarda like him? Actually like him? Is she using him? She doesn't seem malicious in any way, but she almost seems regretful that she's pushed him into like an extreme. I need to know if she actually is in love with Jace. Okay? Because I'm not gonna lie, in Act 1, I was very pro Caitlyn and Jace, even though all we got glimpse of was maybe a brother-sister relationship, but I was looking past that. I was like, no, like, wait, no. And then, so Jace found himself a different lady, and I need to know if this is true love. And do I talk about champions that I want to see in the future, or are you...
Oh, no, that's the second part of this part.
Okay, then I'm not going to talk about that.
So this is just like, what do you want, I guess, questions answered, or maybe places you want them to go. Like, do you want this to stay in the Piltover Zahn, I guess, conflict? Or now that, obviously, with the introduction of Hextech and the Hextech gates that the Piltover city provides, and obviously, one of the major kind of loose threads in the story with Mel's mother, who's a commander of Noxus, coming to Piltover in order to gain the Hextech technology to then use in battle against a potential invader, right? Because she specifically mentions there's a man that kills Mel's brother / her son, and that the man is not satisfied by his death. And so obviously, do you want to see more of this internal Noxus conflict as well?
So is the Noxian woman someone important? That general,
so
Mel's
she's not
mother?
A champion.
Yeah, she's not
as far as I'm aware, I don't know what her actual role is, but
do you think the son is a the son can't be champion, right? Because the son's dead.
Yeah, so the son's not a champion. The man that kills her son could be a number of champions. So it easily could be someone that we would know and recognize.
Okay. I'm going to be real with you. I don't know that I care about Noxus. I don't actually... I'm struggling to even name the characters from Noxus or the champions from Noxus.
Like Darius, Draven.
Nope, don't care. No. Well, I like
Swain.
playing... Nope.
I think Scion technically is from
Don't.
Noxus.
He's ugly.
Well, yeah, because he's like a man that died and then was brought back to life through magic.
Yeah, so honestly, I mean, Darius and Draven are interesting because they're brothers. That's literally the only interesting part, I think. And I like playing Draven in the game. But yeah, I honestly, Noxus can be whatever. I'm interested. I love the Freljord, and my personal favorite champion of all time is from a little place called Ionia. So, listeners, I love Ahri. Ahri is my favorite League of Legends champion. I make it a personal mission to own all of her skins.
And Brian thanks you for that.
Yeah, I'm very mediocre at playing Ahri, if I do say so myself. But I would love to see some Ionian champions. I also love Karma. I love playing as Karma. I'm not good as Master... Well, no, I almost said Master Yi, but I don't play Master Yi. Yeah, I'm not good at him. But I also love Xayah and Rakan. So I love those two as characters also, and would kind of like to know a little bit more about them. So I'm very interested in Ionia. And Freljord, I love Ashe. Ashe was my very first champion love, because she's one of the OG characters that you get when you first learn how to play the game. So I learned how to, Ash was my champion in the beginning when I like didn't have any champions, and she's fun to play and relatively easy.
And I think we have a
beautiful.
strong likelihood that Freljord makes an appearance because obviously Heimerdinger has that pet Poro that kind of just is there.
Are Poros only from the Freljord?
I don't know if they're only from the Freljord, but there are many Poros that live in the Freljord.
Right, okay.
So
I mean, I screamed when I saw that Poro.
Yeah, the fact that Heimerdinger has that Poro with the monocle, I think, is probably a strong likelihood we might get some sort of Freljord interconnection into the story. But also at the same time, they are a disparate, wintry land. So maybe if they decide to keep the stories in other locations like Piltover and Zon, that might not ever come to fruition. But I think there's something interesting with the fact that, Mel's mother being from Noxus and that character appearing in the story means that whatever is happening in Noxus is a likely thread that we'll at least go there and see what's happening. And
yeah, so are you interested in that?
Yeah, on the flip side, there is a Noxus versus Demacia conflict that we know, right? These being the Noxus and Demacia are the two major city-states in the world of Runeterra. So I could definitely see like us going to either one of those places, especially Noxus. I mean, when we see Mel's mother come in on the ship, right? And it's that classic like juggernaut, like steel, I guess Greek inspired, just like heavy duty ship. And you're like, Noxus is known for its military might. I'm like, there is more to Runeterra than the technology struggle that Piltover has. And I think the kind of regular raw nature of like, here's the militaristic empire of Noxus, and here's like the anti-magic, domain of Demacia, I think has interesting implications that could lead into this like hex tech storyline that's going on in Piltover and Zon.
Oh my gosh, do you think a Demacian champion killed the Noxan?
I'm not sure about that, but I mean, technically, I think Jarvan there might be some storylines with Jarvan the Fourth of Demacia that might be related. I don't know if he's like bloodthirsty like that, but it could be Jarvan that's the one that committed the crime.
Listen, now that I looked up Demacian champions, and I did not know that Sona was from Demacia, and Sona is like my second favorite champion of all time. Like, if I'm gonna be real, I'm darn good at playing Sona in League of Legends. I'm gonna toot my own freaking horn, I love playing her as support, and if I could see Sona in Arcane, my life would be made.
So now that it seems we're full swing on this, what champions do you want to see? What champions are you hoping actually appear in future seasons of Arcane?
So
I guess in this case, maybe reel it in, maybe I'm going to
dial it back. I'm going to
reasonable hopes.
Yeah. Okay. I'm dialing it back. I'm not going to pull up the map of Runeterra and pick every single my favorite champion of a region. I'm going to dial it back. So in terms of Piltover and Zon, honestly, I'm real interested in seeing Ezreal and Blitzcrank.
I don't know what role Blitzcrank would have.
You have no emotions on your face when I literally said those two.
Yeah, I mean, Ezreal is known as an explorer, so he kind of goes around the entire world of Runeterra. So I guess if there's something in Piltover Zon that he's interested in, he would be there. But Blitzcrank, like, I don't know really his backstory, so I'm not super interested in like why he would appear. But I guess as like, he's not Hextech, I think. Blitzcrank's just a machine.
So when I in preparing for this episode, when I was like double checking where some of these characters were from, like literally Ezreal is listed as a Piltover champion. So that's why I picked Ezreal, because I'm very intrigued by him. And then Blitzcrank, hold on, let me double check, because I swear.
Well, I guess also, are these characters you think would add to the story? I guess not just characters you would like to appear, but like knowing where the story might go, do you think like they would also be, fruitful?
Okay. Yes, because Blitzcrank was created by Victor.
Oh, okay.
That's why I was like, I wanted to see, like, is Victor, once Victor, like, I guess,
fully evolves
or jazzes up his body, how does Blitzcrank come about?
I guess so, because in the game we don't get a lot of Blitzcrank's personality, so it would be interesting to see if he has a mind or a personality to see. Is he like a Baymax type character or something?
Exactly, right? Like, that's why I'm interested. And then Ezreal, I just thought it would be interesting to see another young adventurer dude to be in the, almost like, I feel like, would Echo and him be friends? Like, that's what I would want.
They could have maybe like a rivalry or something where it's like Echo's stuck in Zaun, and then Ezreal's like, I've been all over Runeterra. I can tell you tales of the Freljord or the Ixtal.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that would be interesting for those two.
Yeah. I think for me, especially with how the story seems like for the sake of the argument that they're going to stick with the Piltover Zaun conflict, because obviously that hasn't been resolved yet, especially with the super mega death rocket at the end of the last episode being fired upon the council. If we're sticking to these places in particular, I'm super interested in seeing Singed in his full form. So like a more developed Singed. Like, I want to see Singed as the Mad Chemist, like him, juicing himself up, juicing everybody up. Like, I want him like fully unhinged Singed. That's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
And obviously Warwick, right? Because I think it was shown in the end of episode 9 or kind of in the last few moments that there is something in the shadows that when we look at Singed, what looks to be something that looks like Warwick is shown on screen. So I think Warwick is a very high probability of making an appearance. Whether or not it's Vander, who knows? But I think, I would like to see him, right? Because Warwick is very tied to Zaun. He's even got like the juice canisters like on his back, so he's very much like a product of that world. And then on the flip side of that, and related to them, I want to see Dr. Mundo. That purple juice and the purple smoke, especially that we see in the Arcane teaser for season 2, screams Mundo. And Mundo's not someone that was like, his backstory isn't that he's an experimenter, he's just a normal doctor, but that he gets experimented on. So I think there's maybe a likelihood that if we're talking about experimentations, we're going to see Warwick, we're going to see Mundo, we'll probably see Urgot and his shotgun knees. I know he's very ugly to look at, but I want to see his shotgun knees.
No.
That'll look cool. But most importantly, and this is my number one ask. So I don't care if no one else appears. Like, we could have the same exact champions, but I want to see Zac. Zac is literally, his name is Zaun Amorphous Combatant. Like, he is built in Zaun to fight against Piltover. So if we're talking about like creations, if Victor creates Blitzcrank for the Piltover side, then I don't know who made Zac, but I want the Zaun Amorphous Combatant to appear for the Zaun side, and I want the Zac versus Blitzcrank battle. And also, for the non-League of Legends players out there, Zac is basically Flubber. That is the easiest way to describe him. He's just a green goo sentient. He's a green sentient goo. So,
yeah, it almost sounds like, okay, I like briefly pulled up his biography, and it doesn't really sound like he had it's like he's a product of a toxic spill. Like,
that's all over Zaun. They got toxicity all up in there, so we could just see some sludge fall on some goo, and then boom, Zac is born. Let's go.
Okay, I also had no idea that Zac was like the way his name is spelled.
Yeah, Zaun Amorphous Combatant.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, I remember in the teasers for him when they first were revealing him that was the acronym that they had, literally Zaun Amorphous Combatant, and then there were like periods after it, and then that's what his name ended up being, just Zac. And I'm like, oh, I like that. Like, that's a fun little way to tease that, because they had like paper notes describing like this is what Zack is.
Got it. So, okay, before you try to like end this whole discussion, because honestly, like I'm loving this. I'm loving talking about it. I'm loving just speculating for the future. There was another like kind of maybe like a clue or foreshadowing moment that I wanted to ask your opinion on. So I read this on Reddit where someone had asked, do you think that Jinx's tattoos, her blue cloud tattoos, were based off the fact that Vi told her to set off the flare that created blue smoke?
Wow. I feel like that's a stretch, but I could see that maybe being connected. I think there is something to, yeah, I don't know. I could see it, but I don't believe it off first time hearing it.
Okay. I mean, there were people that were like, man, that does, you know, some people were like, man, I could see them reverse engineering that. Like deciding that.
Yeah, it could be like
something.
2020 hindsight to be like, let's add more meaning to this than there originally was. I mean, from a design perspective, I really like it. You know, it's kind of cool. Like she has those tattoos on the right side of her body. Yeah, so I like that. But
I mean, honestly, sure. There's so much to dissect from this, right? Like whether it was intentional or just foreshadowing.
And you know, a lot of this, as much as we mentioned before, a lot that League does do in the games, they don't do. And I think that's like products like Arcane are the things that they're trying to fill in the gaps of what they haven't been able to do with the game itself. And so I'm really appreciative of it. And it seems like Tiffany is too. So now we're coming down to how we end every episode of Peer Review. Tiffany, do you recommend this experience?
Hundo P. I recommend this experience. I don't even care. You don't have to have played League of Legends. I've literally told people that haven't played League of Legends, watch it. And then one of them told me that they had a traumatic experience way back when dealing with that game, or dealing with people who played that game. And I literally was like, get over it and get on board, okay? This is a fantastic show. You know, each episode is around 40 minutes. There's 9 episodes. They really feel like 3 movies to me. Like, before we started recording, you mentioned that it kind of feels like one movie and then one, like, really long movie. With Act 2 and 3 combined, watching them together would probably be more, more... I didn't want to say digestible story thing, but, like, it more satisfying to get all that story at once. But I think this show is great. I think you get great character development, even if you know them or don't know them. And I think League players and non-League players can find enjoyment in this show.
And, you know, listeners, I'm right there with Tiffany. My final recommendation, I recommend this to any viewer that likes animated shows. And I'd say that's the caveat.
That's true.
Here. Obviously, this is a very kind of boutique product. You know, this is Riot Games partnering with Fortiche doing the animation for this show. And it has a very interesting animated art style, but, you know, that being the crux of it, it is animated. So if animation/animated movies or shows isn't your thing, then I don't think this is something that will convince you otherwise. Like, as great as the show does look, you know, the special effects, the sound, the music that they do, I don't think it's something that's like, this is the best in the biz, you know, for animation. But, you know, if that's not a concern to you, I 100% recommend it. And also, as Tiffany said, you don't need to, and most importantly, you don't need to know the game. I think, if anything, this can give you enough context to understand why other people might enjoy the game, you know, such as Tiffany and I, and why we're even doing a peer review about the show in the first place. And so with that brings us to the end of this peer review. And until next time, take care.